I am Marcus James Dixon with Gold Derby, and we would like to welcome back to our film composers panel John Powell for Migration, Branford Marsalis for Rustin, and Daniel Pemberton for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Hello, everyone, again. I would like to get the ball rolling with finding out from each of you when you get a brand new gig to compose a movie or a show or anything really. What is step one? Like, do you read the entire script page by page, or do you sort of compose right away based on just images or ideas? And John, let's start with you on this one.
I used to think it was a great idea to read the script until I read a script once and then came up with a whole bunch of brilliant ideas for the script and then saw the film, which was completely fucking different. It drove me nuts. I had to write the whole thing again. So I deliberately don't ever read scripts now. And preferably, I try and come in as late as possible. I mean, basically, I try and come in as close to the end as possible so that it's finished. Because then I kind of immediately know sort of what the film is and what the tone is. I think you can see a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously, it's great to be there at the beginning when stuff, starts to sort of really develop. And I have done those, but my preference is to be there late.
And Branford, do you have a preference?
I mean, that was the story. John just nailed it. I got a script, writing incidental music for a play, and I wrote it all out, and the director says, "This is ridiculous. You haven't seen the play yet." And when I went to rehearsal and saw the play, it was amazing, and I knew I'd written the wrong thing. So that will not happen to me a third time. So I'm just done with that. So I agree. Same story.
And Daniel.
I'm slightly different. I'm like the goody two shoes who hands in his homework on time. I always like reading the scripts. It really depends on what movie you're doing. I think every movie is quite different. I worked quite a lot with Aaron Sorkin, and obviously his scripts are pretty good. I mean, he writes amazing scripts, and they stay. He's directing the film, so what's in the script stays in the film, which is rare because I remember doing King Arthur and reading the script and going, I don't know what's going on here. I'm sure it's going to work into something, and I know they're going to change it a million times anyway. So I think I've worked both ways. I like with Spider-Verse, I was involved for like incredibly long, like almost 5 years, from the ending the first one. And I think that kind of like closeness on a production can be really good because you can really get under the skin of a film and really make something that feels really different. But at the same time, it can also be terrible because you can get to the end and everyone's given you so many different steers that you don't have the freshness that you need sometimes coming in late. I've come in, when films are finished or very, very late. And that can also be great because you kind of rely on your gut instincts on what the film is, and you have an immediate reaction to what you're seeing. I totally get it when you read a script and you visualize something and the film is very different. So I like to sort of vary it up on both sides. It's a lot less stressful coming in last, like right at the end. I think when you come in early, you're basically setting yourself up to be like the guy everyone works out, the therapist. Everyone works out their musical problems with you.
Do you all have a film score when you were growing up that made such an impression on you that you decided, this is something I want to explore with my life? A favorite movie track or a theme or something that always stuck with you? Brentford, let's start with you.
I went to an arts high school in New Orleans, and my teacher, Dr. Bro, because it was topical, we did an analyzation of a lot of the music in Jaws. And the part that really intrigued me was clearly the two bass notes. And Dr. Bro said, well, your non-music friends don't even know that it's the music that's making them jump. And I thought that was incredulous. I'm like, there's no way. He says, well, just ask them. So that was my introduction to the subconscious power of music and film. And I took a film class that year and was introduced to Kurosawa's works and Truffaut's works. And the way that, of course, I can't remember the composer's name now. Help me, guys. Kurosawa. Yeah.
Truffaut.
Interesting.
Depends which Truffaut film it is. Herman, like Fahrenheit.
No, it was, I can't remember. It was The Last Metro was the film that I saw. The Last Metro. Catherine Deneuve was in it, and Gérard Depardieu. And it's way back. But the guy who wrote for Yojimbo is the same. What's his name? He's famous.
Was it Georges Delerue?
No, and I'm talking about the Japanese composer with Akira Kurosawa's movies, and Ruiji Yamamoto, is that it? Anyway, that was the first time that I listened to music differently after 1975, and I really got into Jerry Goldsmith's music and the variety of stuff that he did, because he did Planet of the Apes, I think, and I was really amazed by that really contemporary score. And James Horner after that, because a lot of the music that he wrote before the Penny Whistle movie was really, really incredible stuff. And there are a lot of great.
You played on his scores, because you played on Sneakers, which I love.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that one though.
Okay, I love that score, man. I didn't realize how much I dug your saxophone playing before I rewatched Sneakers a while back, and I was something like, shit, this is Branford playing sax. This is Branford's music. This is so cool.
Oh, it's James's music. I was a kid too. I was in my late 20s, and I was on my way to Europe. So I flew in for 2 days, played, and said, nice to meet y'all, and took off. And I really, my mindset wasn't really focused on me writing for film. I mean, that was so far removed from my reality. But I did listen a lot, because I love listening to music that deserves to be listened to. And that was my introduction to it, and it continues today.
And Daniel, how about you? Any influential movie scores when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I sort of got probably the biggest one was Blade Runner, and it's the thing that's been interesting about Spider-Verse is I basically got to slightly live out my slight Blade Runner fantasies with 2099's world.
That's a good one.
Because it looks like Blade Runner. I'm like, great. In fact, the most midlife crisis purchase I ever did was buy the Blade Runner synthesizer, the CS80, which was which is equivalent of buying a sports car, that costs a lot of money to maintain and you never use it. I think Blade Runner by Vangelis, I grew up loving synthesizer music. That was the sort of, flicked my switch when I was like 10 or 12. And I think for me, the immersiveness of that world and the sort of the way it sounded like nothing else out there. And it's not an electronic score. It's like everyone calls it electronic. It's electronics with like these really interesting world instruments and orchestral percussion. It's, and for me, I love that he managed to make a sort of unique sonic world, and something I've always chasing in most films I do. And then I'd say, aside from that, I went through a period of basically just caning every John Barry release. Like I went through a year of pretty much listening nothing but John Barry and a lot of Morricone. And I think, again, it's like with John Barry, it was the kind of the lushness of the melodies, and that, there was invention in there, but it was, the writing was quite elegantly simple. Whereas Morricone, it was a lot more complicated, but had such inventiveness in the sound as well, but still with a kind of melodic core. So that always is something else I'm always trying to chase, the kind of avant-garde with the emotional, sort of more traditional melodic structures.
And how about you, John?
I've tried to think about this, and I think I'm very confused in my history of film music, because two things happened. The one thing I really remember, and this wasn't even in the cinema, but watching on TV, watching West Side Story, and thinking that's amazing music for a film. Surely that's how it should always be. Not really understanding at the time, being a bit young. And the other thing, which was my father was a session musician in London, and his idea of Well, he had two ideas of childcare. One of which was in the car outside the pub with the cheese and crisps, and the other one was to leave me behind the trombones. So I think that's why I've got slight hearing problems, and I overwrite for brass like buggery. So I actually kind of grew up with sort of film scores being blasted at me, and not really thinking about it other than it was a job for my dad. So I'm very confused.
That's a killer story, bro. I love that.
Do you all have a favorite genre of music to write for in film, or conversely, is there a genre maybe you haven't written for yet, but you're itching to do it one day? Daniel, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
My favorite genre is normally the opposite one to what I've been doing last job. So I'm doing a rom-com at the moment, which is not something I normally do. It's not really a rom-com, but it's kind of got rom-com aspects to it. And I got to write very big, I'm going to say slushy string stuff, which has been really nice. It's quite old school, the approach, and I wouldn't want to do that every film, but this film, it's been really fun. And there's certain things I think I'm better at than others. I'm not going to tell everyone my weak spots in a kind of tonight. But yeah, we all know each other's weak spots. You're like, they're not very good at that stuff. I would like, the one thing don't feel I've really done is the kind of world. I don't say world building. I kind of don't mean that in a horrible franchisey kind of way. I mean that in a sort of alien world, and not necessarily alien, but like something that's very atmospheric and a bit more widescreen. I think a lot of the films I've done move at a very fast pace, and I'd like to do one that had a bit of a slower, more immersive feel to it. I'm the fast-paced guy, it turns out. So yeah, a slower pace, widescreen film.
And John?
I don't know. The one that I don't do is horror. I've never really fancied it. So maybe that would be the interesting thing to do, is to finally do a horror film. But it would really have to be I don't know. I just did a documentary. I'd never done a documentary before, and I was persuaded into it before I knew it. I was doing it, and it was really hard. I'm never going to do those again. They're way too hard, documentaries. So maybe I'll feel the same about horror. On Migration, the strange thing was that after I got hired by Benjamin to do this, because obviously I'd done a lot of animation, he was on the plane watching Don't Worry Darling, and and he got to the end and then saw my name and thought, oh my God, I've hired the wrong guy. Because it's a very different sort of thing. So I've always slutted it around a bit. I've enjoyed that. That's one of the things. The fun thing about film music is that you get to try all sorts of different things. But horror, I've never found a way into that.
I've done one horror, and the one thing and mine was almost like a classy horror. It was a period drama, but horror's a weird thing because there's like a very distinctive toolbox that you have to create, which is almost like lots of big payoff jump bits and suspense. And after a while, I found it a bit like, I don't know if I like doing this so much, because it's a lot of work. It's actually I think it's far more work. It's like that and comedy, far more work than people give it credit for, because doing those jump scares, one, fine, but you have to do 3 in a row. And getting them not sounding stupid is tricky.
And Branford, what about you in terms of genres?
I've been really lucky as a kid. I played in youth orchestra for years, and I learned how to play early New Orleans jazz from Danny Barker, who was the original banjoist with Armstrong in the 30s and 40s. I played in an R&B band, and I played in jazz groups, and I always associate listening to music with, when you switch a sound, you have to listen to a lot of music. I played in a merengue band, and I just love the idea of challenging myself and of getting to write outside of my comfort zone. Like what Daniel was saying, I like to bear my weaknesses to all, because that's the only way that I've ever been able to improve, is by running towards my weaknesses in order to smooth them over or correct them. So I love the challenge. I really don't know. I mean, every time one of these projects comes up, which is really infrequent for me, I have to put on a completely different hat than the hat that I usually wear, and I really do enjoy the process. It accesses a very different part of my brain than what I normally do, and allows me a lot of my musical training. And when I talk about musical training, I mean mostly listening to records. That comes out a lot more in film than it would in specific jazz bands or R&B bands or all the other stuff that I've done. So whatever it is, I'm game.
We got to get you into animation. I think.
Bruh.
I want to hear that score.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be frightening to me. I'm game, but it would be really frightening. It's a lot of music.
Yeah, you got to find the right one. I kind of held off for a long time because I still feel like some of them are so intense. Like I did this one called The Bad Guys, and I felt, okay, I can do this because this is more my wheelhouse of like heisty type music.
Right.
But yeah, I also find like big scale animation is quite terrifying, because you watch some films and you're like, this is great. This isn't changing every 10 seconds.
Well, the first thing, John, I'm doing a deep dive on you moving forward, sir. So I will definitely know what it is that I'm supposed to do. And I met Daniel a couple of years ago, so I've already checked out a lot of his stuff anyway. And I was the first person to insult him and congratulate him at the same time when he won the HMA just now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, congratulations, you sod. And
That's a
it was
very
great.
nice
Actually, it was great. I yelled when they announced your name. I went, yeah, and everybody looked at me like a strange person. But that was really cool, man, to be there to hear them say that.
I had to record that video, and I was at Abbey Road. I was pretty pissed, to be honest. We'd done this huge session. You know, when you've done like a really, really big session and you're like,
yeah,
my brain is like so on overdrive.
Right.
To just subdue it with alcohol. And then I got told I have to record this acceptance speech. I was like, So
it didn't look that way. It looked like you guys were having a good time. You didn't look particularly knackered or anything like that. You just
we were like, well, I was wired. I was, that's one of the great vibes, I think, when you've done a big session that's like, it was a real, like, we've only got one day, race against time type. We've got to get all this stuff. We've got to get it. You've only got like 3 hours of the strings and, another maybe 3 with strings and brass. And like,
always fun. Sounds like a jazz.
Those sessions, which are terrifying, but when you pull them off, they're really satisfying.
Yeah, that's what I do for a living. You got 2 hours. Yeah, okay, good. We're good.
Yeah, it all comes alive in the last 10 minutes for me. The last 10 minutes where it's like, okay, shit, right.
Yeah.
Bar 63 to bar 72, go, boom, do it twice, right? If any of you are like, I'm a way too much, so let's just try one more kind of guy. Are you a safety? Once you got a good take, do you go for another one? I totally didn't. Your brother did not enjoy I did a thing with your brother once, and he didn't enjoy my approach.
Oh yeah, he wants one. He's a one and done guy.
Yeah, he's a one and done guy. He's a
one and done guy. He's like, hey man, I practiced too hard for this shit, man. I don't want to do this again. He's just a one and done guy. But
yeah,
he's not really. I was a session guy. So if you wanted to do 20 takes, I'd endure you if I had to, but I wouldn't do it personally. How about you, John?
I discovered quite a long time ago that my repetition of recording things is mainly for me trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing. Not necessarily because the players can't play it the way I was talking about. It's like the great thing about this gig is that, and I think one of the reasons I love doing it is that they pay me to work with the greatest musicians on earth. I mean, who can play anything. And I have such fun trying to sort of see if I can find something that they can't do. And we get kind of close, but it's always amazing what they can do. And if I do it again, I've always tried to tell them that, sorry, this is me trying to figure this out. It's not because you can't play it. If they can't play it, it is my fault. So I then would try and fix it and change it. But no, I try and do it always if it's really easy stuff. I mean, I always get 2 takes because, you know, as we know, nothing actually exists in one place digitally. So
There's that. I never thought about it that way, but yeah. I just give the musicians a lot of latitude. I don't even put dynamic markings on my pages.
right.
And they say, well, you know, there's no dynamic markings. I say, yeah, well, there are only 45-second cues. We'll sort it out. And if you guys have any suggestions, chime them out. And then they start, you know, maybe a dim here. I was like, yeah, man, let's try it. No, that's not that, you know. And I just say, okay, let's just start at like pianissimo and work our way up. Because it's all short. Yeah, I think that if I had to write in a movie where there were several 5-minute cues, I would do that very differently. But for what I'm doing now, I like to give a lot of leeway to the musicians to help me make this into something that the musicians would enjoy and that does work with the film.
Yeah, because it's difficult sometimes. You put too much dynamic. Like I kind of go both ways. Sometimes I put hardly anything on, or sometimes I'll put way too much on. And you know, it is that thing of like you got to rework it in once you hear it, because you hear things the first time and you're like, this sounds great, or you're like, oh my god, shit.
Yeah,
Like, it's panic time. Why does this not sound right?
right. I love that, man. It's really exciting. I really do like it. That thing when it doesn't go the way you expect it to and you have to fix it. That's kind of when I'm at my best. I like that.
Weirdly, on the first Spider-Verse, on the opening, there's this quite cool off drum beat that goes like a sort of like, I'm only saying it's quite cool because it was a complete mistake. We missed the bar. There was a 5/4 bar and the drummer came in like a beat late or beat early. I can't remember, whatever. And as a result, it gave it this really cool offbeat because I don't know, some of my rhythm programming is a bit meat and 2 potatoes. It's not as cool as it should be. But suddenly it was really cool because all the kind of accents were coming on the wrong beat.
Yeah.
And it made the whole thing so much cooler. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. And that was just a goof. And I think it's knowing when you get a goof and being like,
sometimes they work.
And then pretend it was your idea, which I've totally destroyed now by telling everyone.
Happy
all right.
accidents are the best.
That well said.
Well, thank you all so much. I just kind of sat here and enjoyed your conversation. I hope all of the viewers at home will remember Migration and Rustin and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse as they go to mark their ballots for all these award shows coming up. Thank you all so much for chatting with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Great to see you guys as well.
All the best, John. Definitely. All right, Pemberton. See you soon, bro.